Even before the coronavirus started impacting CONEXPO 2020, U.S. economic growth seemed to be slowing since the start of the year. The mild winter had housing markets surging. Public spending was blooming to sustain non-residential growth as private spending weakened. Associated General Contractors Chief Economist Ken Simonson said in February, continuing job gains throughout the nation, along with low interest rates, make a good year for residential construction especially likely, while spending in many non-residential categories should match or exceed 2019 levels. The Fed's emergency interest rate cut, the biggest since the economic crisis, in response to the virus reaching our shores, changes the forecast calculus. A selection of economists and association experts will dive deeper into the current and future health of the construction industry, a segment sponsored by Caterpillar. Welcome to CONEXPO 2020. I'm Diana Henry. Joining me now, Ken Simonson, Chief Economist from the Associated General Contractors of America. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, happy to be here.
I can't believe I'm going to ask this question. What is the outlook for the remainder of 2020? It's only March, but let's talk about the rest of the year.
Right. Well, at the beginning of the year, AGC released a survey. We have about 28,000 member companies spread throughout the U.S., and we got 956 responses. They were overwhelmingly positive about the outlook for 13 construction segments. More people thought that those segments would increase than decrease in 2020. And indeed, in the first 2 months of the year, all the contractors I talked to, and I travel practically every week, they said, we're busy, we have full order books, we'd take on more work if we could only find more workers. This week, I'd say things have shaken down somewhat in that there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen to the economy with the coronavirus, with the slowdown in global growth. But for now, contractors are saying, we haven't heard about any projects being canceled.
Well, that's good news.
Yes.
Right.
Still a positive outlook, in other words.
I have a number of questions, but since you brought up the coronavirus, do you care to project a little bit on the impact this might have and the risks that might be involved?
Well, it's certainly a story that's evolving by the hour. As I said, contractors have not reported any project cancellations or deferrals, and really no interruptions, but a lot of speculation about the supply chain being disrupted. That we're fortunate in one small way that this hit in China just at the annual slowdown for the Lunar New Year. So that meant that a lot of supplies had already been delivered to the U.S. in anticipation of that, and we're kind of working through those inventories. But I'm hearing day by day about more products, whether it's cabinets, countertops, elevators that are coming from northern Italy or not coming now. So I do think we'll start to hear about projects that aren't able to complete, and then owners who are running into cash flow problems because they're not getting the visitors, or they suddenly say, well, we don't need to build another casino or a high-end hotel. We don't expect to have nearly as many people coming in the future. So I think the impacts on construction are going to happen, but it's hard to say how extensive, how long they'll last, how soon they'll show up.
The story is unwritten yet on that one. Material costs. Let's talk about the impact it's going to have going forward, negatively or positively.
Well, we've certainly seen a huge drop in oil prices, thanks in part to this dispute between Russia and Saudi Arabia. So crude oil prices way down. That's going to bring down the cost of gasoline and diesel fuel that contractors use for their own trucks and equipment, and also make deliveries less expensive to the extent that the fuel cost is broken out separately. We've also seen a drop in copper prices, aluminum, steel, and as global demand slows down, those prices should stay much lower than we expected just a few weeks ago. So for now, I think this is good news for contractors who haven't already locked in their prices.
That is good news. You touched on this earlier with the conversation around the survey. Let's talk about labor availability. Workforce development is a hot topic.
Well, that's right. And our respondents were very upbeat about hiring more workers. 75% of them said they expected to add to their workforce this year. But 81% said they'd had trouble filling positions last year, and nearly 2/3 said they expected it to be as difficult or more so this year. Not to harp on coronavirus, but once again, this could rear its ugly head in terms of, say you have one crane operator and that person has to self-quarantine, or you're expecting 50 truckloads of concrete to be delivered for a pour one day, and the concrete company can't get enough drivers. So we do expect that very isolated short-term labor impact. For the longer term, contractors and AGC chapters, we have 88 of them around the country, have been working a lot to get the message out that construction pays well, that it's got a great career track. So many owners of companies started out as helpers and summer jobs, but it's going to take a long time to attract enough people in to fill the shoes of those who are retiring in great numbers.
Joining me now today, Dustin Anderson from Sage Construction and Real Estate. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, you bet. Glad to be here.
Let's talk about how the shortage of qualified workers is affecting the industry. It's a big deal right now.
It really is. You know, we've had an opportunity to work with the Associated General Contractors to do a business outlook survey. So we've done this for several years now, and it really looks at the industry and says, hey, what are the things that are affecting us as an industry? And the one that keeps popping up is that qualified worker shortage. It's real and it's tangible to these contractors. And it's not just from a trade labor standpoint, it's also from the professional project managers, project engineers standpoint. So it's really across the board.
And are you helping find a solution to overcome that challenge with them? Maybe brainstorming?
Yeah, so you know, we're always working with them on that. We think technology has an opportunity to play a unique factor in this. When we think about technology, you know, and how it could possibly help improve things like productivity. If we can do more with that workforce that they do have, make them more productive during their time, less time wasting, waiting, those types of things, then we can really do that. So some of the things that are done are on just a human capital front. So how do we help them find qualified workers and identify them, get them in the recruiting processes earlier, identifying them in trade schools. But it's also, again, how do we use evolving technologies like drones or robots to help fill the gap?
So it's combining that education and innovation together and be collaborative, right?
Yeah.
How does that partnership really work?
Well, you know, collaboration is something that's really important to construction, right? So when you look at a big construction site, there are many different entities that are involved in it. So you've got a general contractor that's kind of, you know, overseeing most of it, a developer that's funding it, but then you have subcontractors and trade contractors that are involved. You've got equipment, you've got all these different pieces. So if we can help them collaborate on when one contractor has finished one part of the building, then another one can be there right on time rather than, you know, waiting and doing those things. So the collaboration piece is really important. Technology enables us to do that, right? So sometimes it's as simple as automated text messaging to let people know that, hey, you know, we need workers in this part of, you know, the building that we're creating to just how do we communicate with drawings and standards in buildings.
Information technology implementation, adoption, all of that, everybody, you know, putting their arms around it and saying, I embrace this. What are the challenges you see in this, and how are you helping to gain that benefit?
Yeah, so it's real. Like these projects are difficult to do. When you want to bring technology into a building, into a business, into a process, you're typically replacing an old way of doing things, right? And so that's difficult. It's difficult on what we call organizational change management. So how do our people now do this process differently? So there's a lot of thought that goes into that. The biggest thing that we're seeing, though, is the investment in technology has been increasing. So contractors are willing to spend more, and they've had more practice in implementing these solutions. So they're able to better handle that organizational impact. So
across the board, right? It's not just at leadership, it goes all the way down and across platforms and departments and touching everybody on the job site on up.
You're exactly right. And there's thought put into that now, where I think in the past it was, hey, we need to implement this, and you know, a CEO or a CFO says, well, this is going to be a good tool for us, but how does it affect, you know, someone that's entering an AP invoice on a day in, day out basis? They're putting those pieces of information into a business system. How do we ensure that their change is as minimal as possible?
Mike Ireland from the Portland Cement Association joins me now. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me, Diana.
You are doing a really great launch of a campaign called Shaped by Concrete.
Yep.
What is it? Why are you launching it?
Well, concrete has been around for millennia. It goes way back, even before the Romans, but that's where we really got a feel for it. And it is ubiquitous. I mean, it is the number one man-made product on the earth is concrete. It's the second most consumed product in the world after water. So it's everywhere. And people don't even see it anymore. I mean, it's everywhere. You walk, you look at the street, you
Take
look
it
at the
for granted.
sidewalk, you look at the buildings, they don't even know what it is. Well, I mean, they know what it is. Some people confuse concrete and cement, but it's there, but they don't know what it is. And so we feel it's time, particularly now with the world talking a lot about sustainability and about climate, for us to tell the story about cement and concrete. So we're really launching this campaign here. It's an obvious place to launch the campaign because this really is the home of the construction industry. But a lot of the folks here know that concrete's durable, that it's sustainable, but they also don't realize that it's resilient and that it actually can help the environment. It's getting kind of a bad rap sometimes. People say, well, isn't it a dirty or isn't it a dirty material? And we're like, actually, no. We want to get that story about how we're actually a sustainable material, particularly as the world is starting to urbanize, but we're also getting these huge climate-based events that are affecting people. People are going to have to know how to deal with that. And they're going to need a product that they live in and they work in that makes them feel safe.
Can you talk a little more about that sustainability? Because that's a key thing here.
Yeah, it is. So cement, I mentioned earlier, cement's a little bit different than concrete, although a lot of people talk about it differently. But cement, in the manufacture of cement, you're taking limestone and you're superheating the limestone, and in that process it releases CO2. So what we've been doing over the past, and it's also very energy intensive. So in the past 40 years, we've actually reduced on the energy side our energy consumption about 40%. We're also now able to use a lot of material that would otherwise go to a landfill in the process. So we burn rubber tires, you can burn trash, there's a lot of things you can burn to reduce that kind of footprint. But of course, the real process part of this, where you're creating that cement product, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to do research on carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. So that again would really almost get to the point where you've reduced that carbon footprint on the cement side to nothing. What's really interesting and what most people don't know, that when you put concrete down, concrete actually absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere, like a tree does.
Wow.
Well, a live tree does. Once you cut a tree down, it no longer absorbs it. But concrete, over its lifetime, will absorb CO2. And even after concrete's done and you've broken it up and you're reusing it, it's still absorbing carbon.
It's a great trivia question that now we're all going to get right because you just made us smarter on that.
Right. And so if you take those two things, if you take what the cement industry is doing and that concrete is kind of the superhero in the story absorbing, you've got a point now where we could get to a point where we're actually the superhero absorbing more CO2 out of the atmosphere than's created in the process of putting concrete down. So we're really excited about it. Again, it's a story we're telling. We're taking the chance to tell it because people haven't heard it. And we've been kind of quiet and unassuming and letting other people tell our story for us. But we're pretty proud of what we've done.
Got to be a part of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
So how can we all get involved in this campaign?
Well, that's really easy. So we've launched the Shaped by Concrete because our world has been shaped by concrete. I would say go to shapedbyconcrete.com, right? You can certainly find us on Twitter, on Facebook, all the normal social media channels. And this campaign really is about anybody being able to find that information, but particularly here, where we're here with this whole industry, the construction industry. And these people are proud of what they do, and it gives them a chance to share this information with their friends, their family, and beyond. So we're really excited. We're just launching it. It's really cool to just get out there and tell the story about all the benefits of concrete. There's over 600,000 people that work in our industry. We're doing a lot for the economy. We're doing a lot for the world, and we're actually making the world greener.
Ed Sullivan from the Portland Cement Association joins us now. Ed, we've got some really big topics to talk about. Let's first talk about what's kept the economy strong over the last few years.
Well, there's no question. Prior to recent events with coronavirus, the economy was strong. It was based on strong consumer spending and a very healthy labor market. Those are two ingredients that are required to have strong growth. You know, consumer spending counts at 2/3 of every dollar the economy generates. That's the fundamental. As long as the consumer is doing good, you're going to have a good economy. Now, it's also important to recognize, this economy has been recovering for 10 years. And a lot of people are saying, hey, we're due for a recession. Recessions don't just happen. They're brought on by excesses during a recovery period, like the last Great Recession. We've given money out to people who shouldn't have gotten it, in terms of mortgages, etc. Right now, those fundamentals remain good, 10 years in, but we are getting older. We don't have the zip and the vigor in the economy that we had back in 2012, 2013. We saw higher growth rates. We are starting to see GDP growth start to slow, and we were expecting that to slow this year and the following year. And then we had a surprise come at us in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, the elephant in the room, right?
Yes,
Let's talk a little bit about how that's impacting all of these fundamentals.
I can tell you, when it first came out, I kind of dismissed it. And I hear it's going over in China. Okay. But I just heard recently, yesterday, a elementary school in the town that I live in is shut down. You know, this whole thing is in part based on fear. It's in part because the mortality rate that's attached to this virus is 10 to 20 times that of regular influenza. Influenza kills 61,000 people a year. So the possibility of it being very harsh, the risks are high. The fear is there. And when you start to talk fear, you're starting to talk consumers again. And the only way you can cure it, apparently, is there's no vaccine. You quarantine. You stay away. You don't spend. Look at the how many people probably came here. I know it probably fell well short of what people were expecting. It is going to have an impact on our economy. The question is, for how long? If you look at regular viruses, the coronavirus and influenza usually lasts 6-7 weeks, and it's gone. The temperatures change it. No one really knows if that's what the pattern is going to be for this. But I will give you a little piece of information that came out yesterday. 6 weeks ago, in China, 4,000 new cases a day. On Monday, 40.
Yeah, it's gone down.
It seems like it is following that pattern. So if that's the way it's going to go, then what we can suggest is the consumer will continue to be fearful, will withdraw, will reduce, until the thing starts to abate, until they feel safer. Now, think about what you did during that period. You didn't go out. You didn't buy that car. You've got some stored and pent-up demand that can be released. And on top of that, the government may do things. The Fed already reduced interest rates 50%. They're talking about other stimuli that will still be in place at the end of that 7 weeks. So here's our scenario. We have the whole first half depressed. It dissipates. And now GDP growth comes back stronger in the second half. What we're really saying is a lot of what's going to happen is a change in timing of economic activity, taken away from the first half and moving it, some of it, into the second half. In the end, are we even? No, we're still going to get hurt. But it may not be the huge declines that some people are expecting. That's all based on our assumption. It's all based on our assumption this thing dissipates. If it doesn't, then that's a completely different story. And you know what? Going down that route maybe adds to the panic and the fear.
Yeah. Joining me now is Jeff Scott, AED Foundation Chairman and President of Intermountain Bobcat. Jeff, thanks so much for coming.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
We have some really important stuff to discuss with you. Let's talk about this technician shortage. It was part of some research that you recently did.
Let me tell you about the research. First off, I'm the chairman of the AED Foundation, and we are a separate entity of the Associated Equipment Distributors, by the way, is what AED stands for. And our foundation's sole purpose is to overcome what we see in the industry as the technician shortage for dealers like my dealership, Intermountain Bobcat. So we commissioned a research study on behalf of our foundation with College of William and Mary. And the findings, if I may, I can just run through a couple of big numbers.
Let us know.
Is that there is a glaring technician shortage in our industry today. And I'll just give you a couple of facts and figures, and these are big numbers. But the study by William and Mary on behalf of the AED Foundation shows that over the next 5 years, we have a shortage of over 73,000 construction equipment technicians.
Say that again, because that's a big number.
73,000 over five years.
Yeah, okay.
So I think the point here is that the equipment industry right now, for qualified technicians to fix all this fancy equipment that we're seeing here at CONEXPO, there's a tremendous shortage. Right now, the equipment industry has a job opening rate 3 times higher than the national average, and most of those would be technicians. Almost 90% of our AED dealerships, which I'm a dealer, have job openings that are above the national average. And here's a number I really like. Among surveyed AED members, 62% say that local educational institutions in their areas are not providing the right proper conduit for education for young people to begin to find the skills to get into the technical degrees like the technicians that we need today. So that's our study. So I always like to say, wow, we know what the shortage is and what the dilemma is, what do we do next?
Right, so how do we answer that? What is your group doing to help overcome these challenges?
You know, and this is why I'm here today as the incoming chair. We have a vision which we call Vision 2024, and I like that because we're also in 2020, so if we're really talking vision, that's a clear-cut 2020 vision for the next 5 years. And again, I want to reiterate this. We know what the shortage is. We know we need technicians to fulfill our needs. So our foundation, it's incumbent upon us to do 3 things in 3 different areas. One, in the schools. We feel that the school system that we have today, there are not enough accredited colleges and universities that have diesel technology programs. So we have a goal over the next 5 years to have over 100 more accredited AED Foundation schools. Secondly, we feel that where this begins, and I'm a parent, I don't know if you are, but we all have kids and they're going through school, is we want to identify maybe what their career track might be in high school. Now this is a time in high school, if you remember, that you really don't know what you want to do, but you have 3 constituents that do. Usually your parents know that they want you to go move out of the house and move on and get a job and go to school. Secondly, you have counselors in your high school programs, which are usually academic counselors and curriculum guidance counselors. And then thirdly, you have instructors. So the AED Foundation is going at the high school level to those 3 constituencies. We want to be able to teach parents that there is a track by which their children, if they show the acumen, could get the skills through their high school programs around technical degrees, and then having those career counselors find a track that they may well go to a trade accredited university that would give them the skills to become a technician. How's that?
You only know what you know, right?
Correct.
If you're not exposed to this opportunity in the construction industry as a potential job for you, you wouldn't even know to even look down that path.
Exactly.
So you do have to have that partnership with education.
And that's really what and then I like we need the students, and we need to help those students identify, and really what our goal is, and I can give you numbers. We want to have over 100 accredited college programs in 5 years. We want to recognize 50 high school programs, or roughly one per state. We want to fill, remember I told you there's 73,000 gap. We want over the next 5 years, just AED and our foundation, to provide the curriculum and hopefully scholarships to supply 10,000 per year. So we think just through our work, and we're going to talk about funding here in a minute, is that we can provide the programs through the high schools feeding into technical programs that we could fill 10,000 technical people to overcome that 73,000 gap. We also have certification programs for existing dealers. Now,
The third part is the most important part, that is my message today. And that's it, hey, how are you going to do it, how are you going to pay for it?
Right.
So as a foundation, as I mentioned, we are a separate foundation from the Association of Equipment Distributors, but we call them investors. So we have most of our investors in the foundation are member dealers. They're dealers like me, Jeff Scott, Intermountain Bobcat. There are fellow cat dealers, deer dealers, Komatsu dealers, and allied dealers all across the country. We also have, since we're here at CONEXPO, which is sponsored by AEM, we have wonderful foundations, such as the Caterpillar Foundation, the Deere Foundation, Komatsu, and on and beyond, that are our manufacturers that are supplying foundation monies to put towards all of the wonderful programs that I talked about.
Doing something great together, right?
And I like that, because this is an industry, remember, as a Bobcat, they're all of our competitors, but we have, and I love this word, I call it co-opetition. We have an issue that transcends all of our dealerships and all of our construction equipment world, and that is the need for these technicians. So yes, we're cooperating as a cooperative in the industry. It's kind of a beautiful thing. So again, as a chairman, we know what the gap is, we know what the need is, and we feel the foundation, our Vision 2024, are really going to hope fill this technician short. But we need all of you, we need all of our equipment dealers, and we certainly need our foundations and individuals out there to help us do it.
Jump on board. And I'm joined by some really important people here at CONEXPO. Dennis Slater, President, Association of Equipment Manufacturers, and Jeff Reed, President and CEO of George Reed Company and VSS International. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining me.
It's good to be here, Diana.
A great show. CONEXPO is just going really well. Busy. Let's talk about something that you guys just released here this week, the new Economic Impact Report. What is it showing from an equipment manufacturer's impact, Dennis, on the contribution to the U.S. economy?
I think one thing, it's really important to come to a venue like this when the whole industry's here and bring this survey here now. What we're trying to do with it is show the importance and the economy of our industry. So 2.8 million people are employed in this industry. It has a huge economic impact on the country. So what we want to do with that is show numbers of how important it is, and then relate those numbers when it comes to issues. So you start talking about, what a trade policy or something else does to affect things. We can say these 2.8 million people depend on good policies to stay employed.
So let's talk about how we're going to use this information then for the presidential election year. We're in it, right, Jeff? Talk a little more about that for us, please.
Well, again, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a town forum here in Las Vegas, which we sponsored, where we had 4 of the Democratic candidates, and the 2, or one of them that is the last one standing apparently, was there, and we talked about infrastructure and posed questions to them of, how do we finance it, how do we fund it? It tends to be the big question as we go forward, and what do we do with hopefully getting a gas tax through to be able to solve this problem.
Some have called 2020 the manufacturing election. Do either of you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure, I can go with that first. Yeah, definitely. We know that those 2.8 million jobs depend on it. They're well-paying jobs. I think the politicians out there understand that manufacturing is important to the really economic well-being of this country. So our goal always is to emphasize that. And also, I think we've had good growth in the country the last couple of years. So you start to forget the fact that some of these policies today, the lack of investment for infrastructure especially, and some of the trade barriers are starting to hurt the manufacturing economy. We had really good growth the last couple of years, but now the survey shows in this last year, it has slowed down. So we have a story to tell with that too.
How are you going to engage the industry and the candidates on this topic?
Well, I think it boils out to, is we're talking about these 2.8 million jobs, we're also talking, that's 12% of the working population in this country. You throw on top of it with this particular show, talking about construction, that's another 7.5% of the working population. So we are almost there at 20% of the population of working people is affected by what we're doing.
Significant impact that the candidates can't ignore.
No, and quite honestly, it's been too long ignored on financing and taking care of our infrastructure. It had been too long since we've had a highway bill through the legislature, through the Congress, to be able to solve this problem.
Yeah, and to tell that story, that it's an investment. So if we work on our roads and bridges and our ports, what really we do is we invest in the country and make ourselves more competitive with that. So it isn't just a tax or an expense, it's something that will be there after we're done.
It builds the future.
Absolutely builds the future.
Let's talk about the AEM 2020 Manufacturing Express. You're going to hit the road.
Jeff? Well, yes, we're going to hit the road this summer with the bus, and it'll be touring probably 60 different manufacturing locations. It will be at both the Democratic and the Republican national conventions, so we'll be doing a lot of time in between at different places across the country, and trying to bring home the point of what manufacturing is in this economy.
Yeah, and talking to, we want to talk to the employees of these companies. So when we get to a stop, we'll get out, we'll talk about our message, we'll do interviews with candidates who are there, and really get out there and tell a story. So in each stop there, it isn't just the corporation that benefits of the company, it's their employees that say, oh yeah, my job does depend on exports, or my job depends on infrastructure.
You can't do this alone, so you do need that participation of other people telling their story, right?
Absolutely, and the fact is we have over 50,000 followers already that work with I Make America, which is part of this, part of our campaign, and we want to activate them to get out there during this election year and talk about manufacturing.
Gentlemen, it's a great topic. We could talk all day about it. Thanks for the work you're doing. Thanks for putting on a wonderful ConExpo for us.
It's great to be here.
When your dealer services your cat, they know it's about keeping a lot more than a machine working. Let's do the work.